When my uncle tried to steal my grandma's will, I didn't scream, I didn't argue, I simply smiled and let him think he'd won. But a week later, when the lawyer read the real will, the look on his face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning my revenge. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Naomi, I'm 30 years old, and this is the story of how I turned my greedy uncle's scheme into his worst nightmare. My grandmother, Eliza, was the kind of woman whose presence could calm an entire storm. She raised me after my parents died when I was 15. To me, she wasn't just my grandmother, she was my mother, my best friend, and the only family that ever truly saw me. Her house smelled like cinnamon and old books, the kind of place where love wasn't spoken out loud, but you felt it in every cup of tea and every story she told by the fire. But when she passed away last winter, that warmth vanished, and in its place came greed. At the funeral, everyone cried, but not everyone's tears were real. I remember catching my Uncle Richard smirking while talking to the lawyer outside the church. He was my father's older brother's sharp suit, slick hair, the kind of man who smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. He had always been obsessed with money, and Grandma's house was his golden ticket. She'd want me to take care of things, I overheard him saying to the lawyer, pretending to sound noble. Naomi's too emotional to handle financial matters. She's sentimental. That word burned. Sentimental. As if love was a weakness. When I approached him later to ask about Grandma's belongings, he waved his hand. Don't worry about it, kiddo. I'll handle the estate. You'll get your fair share. But something in his tone made my stomach twist. The way he said fair share sounded more like whatever's left after I'm done. Days later, I went to Grandma's house to help pack some of her things. That's when I noticed something strange. Her desk drawer where she kept all her important papers was half empty. I knew she had her will there, I'd seen it before. She once showed it to me, right after she made some changes. She told me she wanted to make sure I'd be taken care of, that I'd always have a home. I didn't know the exact details, but I remembered her saying, Naomi, not everyone will be happy when they see what's in this will. But I trust you to do the right thing. Now that the will was missing, her words echoed louder than ever. I called the lawyer's office to ask about the reading of the will, but the secretary told me Uncle Richard had already scheduled a private review. My heart dropped. He was moving fast, too fast. When I confronted him about it, he smiled that same fake smile. Don't stress yourself, Naomi. You're young, you have your whole life ahead. Grandma wanted me to handle the logistics. Logistics? I asked quietly. Or the inheritance? He paused, his jaw tightening. Watch your tone, he snapped. I'm still family. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went through Grandma's old letters, her recipes, even her knitting box, hoping she might have left a clue somewhere. Around midnight, I found a sealed envelope tucked inside one of her favorite books. It was addressed to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter in her neat cursive. My dearest Naomi, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. You've always been my greatest comfort, and I want you to know that I've made arrangements to protect what's rightfully yours. I've updated my will, and the lawyer has a sealed copy. Don't worry if Richard tries to meddle, he'll reveal himself before you have to. Trust your instincts, my girl. Love always. Grandma. I sat there crying, clutching that letter like a lifeline. She knew. She knew exactly what would happen. The next morning, I showed the letter to the lawyer. He looked surprised, then cautious. Naomi, your grandmother did leave an updated will with me, but Mr. Richard came in yesterday claiming she had revoked it. My blood ran cold. Revoked it? That's impossible. He sighed. He brought a copy of a new will signed 2 weeks before her passing. But I can't validate it yet without a proper investigation. I knew what that meant, he forged it. Richard was bold, but stupid. He didn't realize Grandma's real will had a safeguard. Her signature was accompanied by a secret code she only used with me. A pattern she'd shown me once when she paid bills online, saying this is our little secret. And if the lawyer had the real copy, that meant I still had a fighting chance. So I smiled, thanked him for his honesty, and left. My mind was already spinning. I couldn't confront Richard directly, not yet. If I did, he'd cover his tracks. I needed him to think he'd gotten away with it. For the next few days, I acted calm. I attended family meetings, nodded when he spoke, and even offered to help sort Grandma's belongings. But every time I smiled at him, I thought about the forged signature, the missing papers, and Grandma's voice in my head. He'll reveal himself before you have to. And she was right. 3 days later, Richard called a family gathering at Grandma's house to announce that the estate was now officially his. Everyone clapped. Everyone but me. I just sat there quietly, hands folded, heart pounding. When he turned to me and said, "Don't worry, Naomi. You can still visit the house anytime you want," I looked him straight in the eye and smiled. Because what he didn't know was that the lawyer had already called me that morning. He'd verified the signature and Richard's forged will was about to blow up in his face. When I left Grandma's house that evening, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just drove home in silence, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Richard thought he'd won, that I was too soft, too sentimental to fight back. But he had no idea who raised me. Grandma always said real strength doesn't need to shout, Naomi. It just waits and strikes when no one's looking. So, I waited. The next morning, I met with the lawyer again. Mr. Jacobs, a quiet man in his late 50s, looked exhausted but determined. "Naomi," he said, pulling a folder from his desk, "we verified everything. The will your uncle submitted was forged. The real one, your grandmother's final will, names you as the sole beneficiary of her home and her jewelry collection. The savings are split evenly among all 3 family members, but the property, that's yours." For a second, I couldn't speak. I felt tears sting my eyes. Grandma had kept her promise. But Mr. Jacobs wasn't finished. "There's one problem," he said. "Your uncle has already begun transferring assets. If we expose this immediately, he might try to destroy more evidence or stall the court. We need proof, something that ties him directly to the forgery." I took a deep breath. "Then we'll make him expose himself." That night, I pulled out Grandma's old journal. She'd kept everything: receipts, notes, even pictures of Richard at family events. I found one photo that made my stomach twist: Richard standing in her study, pen in hand, holding papers that looked eerily familiar. The date in the corner read 2 weeks before she passed away, the same date on the fake will. It wasn't ironclad proof, but it was a start. Over the next few days, I began to act differently around him. I called him Uncle Rich, laughed at his jokes, even asked him for financial advice. He ate it up. Narcissists always do. The more I played the naive niece, the more confident he became. At one point, he even bragged about how easy it is to handle paperwork when people trust you. I smiled and said, "Grandma always trusted you, didn't she?" He grinned. "Of course. I handled everything for her. She knew I was the smart one in the family." Inside, I wanted to scream. Outside, I just nodded. By the weekend, he invited me to dinner at his house, probably to gloat. I agreed. When I arrived, his wife, Aunt Marcy, greeted me nervously. She looked uncomfortable, glancing between us as if she knew something she couldn't say. At dinner, Richard talked about how stressful it had been managing Grandma's estate. "You wouldn't understand, Naomi," he said between bites of steak. "It's complicated. Taxes, legal fees, you should be grateful I'm handling it." I smiled politely. "I really am, Uncle Rich. Actually, I wanted to ask about the paperwork Grandma signed before she passed. Could you show me? I'd love to learn." He froze for half a second, just long enough for me to notice. Then he laughed. "Oh, sweetheart, those are confidential." I tilted my head. "Confidential? Even from family? Especially from family," he said, his tone sharpening. And Marcy dropped her fork. The sound echoed louder than it should have. She quickly got up and started clearing dishes, avoiding eye contact. That's when I realized she knew. When Richard left to take a phone call, I followed Marcy into the kitchen. She was trembling slightly as she washed a plate. "Aunt Marcy," I said gently, "you don't have to be afraid. I know about the will." She went pale. "Naomi, please don't get involved. He did something stupid." I told him not to. I stepped closer. "He forged Grandma's signature, didn't he?" Her eyes filled with tears. "He said she'd never know. He promised it was just to fix things before the lawyer could make mistakes. But then, when you found that letter," she covered her mouth, realizing she'd said too much. "Do you have anything?" I asked quietly. "Any proof?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "He made copies, everything he forged, every draft. I told him to keep them in the safe in his office. I didn't know what else to do." I thanked her and left. My heart pounded all the way home. That night, I called Mr. Jacobs. "We have a lead," I told him. "He's got the fake will drafts in his office safe. Can we do something about it?" "Not without a warrant," he said carefully. "But if he admits to having them, we can move fast." So I made sure he would. The next day, I showed up at his office with coffee, smiling, chatty, pretending to be the doting niece again. Uncle Rich, I said sweetly, I'm helping the lawyer verify Grandma's signature for the family album. Do you still have the documents you worked on before she passed? I'd love to see her handwriting again. He blinked. Why do you need that? Oh, nothing serious, I said, shrugging. Just sentimental reasons. He smirked. You really are like her. Then, with a casual wave, he said, I have everything stored safely, the will drafts, her letters, all of it. Don't worry. And that was a confession made. When I left his office, I sent a message to Mr. Jacobs. He just admitted to keeping all forged copies in his office safe. He doesn't know we know. Within 48 hours, the lawyer filed a complaint and the police obtained a warrant. By Monday morning, the safe was opened. Inside, they found everything: drafts, forged signatures, even a fake witness statement typed on his computer. He'd saved it all, labeling the folder Estate Final. By Tuesday, he was under investigation. The family was in shock. My cousins were calling nonstop, asking how this could happen. But me, I stayed quiet. I didn't need to shout my innocence anymore. I just let the truth unfold exactly the way Grandma said it would. When I got the lawyer's call confirming that everything was now legally mine, I felt an unexpected calm. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. Still, I wasn't done yet. Because Grandma didn't just want justice. She wanted closure, and I intended to deliver it. So when Richard called me that night, begging for a meeting to talk things out, I agreed. I told him to meet me at Grandma's house the next morning. And when he arrived, I was waiting with a small wooden box and the lawyer sitting right beside me. When Richard walked into Grandma's house that morning, he looked nothing like the confident man who'd once smirked at me across her dining table. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes sunken, and his voice trembled when he said my name. Naomi, he began, this has all been a misunderstanding. I looked up from my chair, calm, collected. A misunderstanding? Forging Grandma's will, stealing her house, and lying to the whole family, sounds like a lot more than a misunderstanding, Uncle. Before he could respond, Mr. Jacobs cleared his throat beside me. Mr. Richard Thompson, he said, his tone formal, we have verified your involvement in the falsification of legal documents concerning Mrs. Eliza Thompson's estate. You've already been notified that the authorities are reviewing the evidence. Richard's face turned red. You can't do this. This is family business. I stood up slowly. That's where you're wrong. This isn't about family anymore. This is about respect for Grandma, for the truth, and for everything you tried to destroy. He looked around the living room, the same one Grandma used to fill with laughter. You'd really do this to your own uncle? After everything I've done for this family? I couldn't help but laugh, softly but bitterly. Everything you've done? You mean stealing, lying, and trying to erase me from Grandma's will? You didn't do it for the family, Uncle Richard. You did it to the family. He clenched his fists, but then his eyes landed on the small wooden box sitting on the table. What's that? This, I said, running my fingers over the carved lid. Something Grandma wanted me to give you when the time was right. He frowned but reached for it. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside, there were no valuables. Just papers, old photos, letters, and a flash drive. He picked up one of the letters and froze. It was written in Grandma's handwriting. To my son, Richard. If you're reading this, it means your greed has led you here. I raised you better than this. I hope one day you'll understand that love cannot be measured in property or inheritance. If you choose lies over family, you'll lose both. Mom. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He picked up the flash drive next. What's on this? I folded my arms. The recordings. Remember how you told everyone I was too emotional to handle paperwork? Turns out, Grandma installed a small security camera in her study last year. It captured every time you went through her documents, including the night you forged her will. He went pale. You're lying. I smiled faintly. I thought you might say that. I turned to Mr. Jacobs, who opened his laptop and played the video. The footage showed Richard entering Grandma's study late at night, rifling through her drawer and pulling out her will. He looked around, then began signing papers. The sound of his pen scratching against paper was painfully clear. For a moment, all you could hear was the old grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Richard's face twisted in horror. You can't use that in court. Oh, we can, Mr. Jacobs said calmly. And we will. But we wanted to give you a chance to do the right thing first. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Sign the official acknowledgement that you forged those documents. Confess and we'll stop this before it becomes public. Refuse and this recording goes straight to the court, the media, and the rest of the family. He stared at me shocked, defeated, cornered. "You're just like your grandmother," he whispered. I smiled. "Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment." With shaking hands he signed the confession. When it was over I felt an odd stillness. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel tight. Justice wasn't loud or flashy, it was quiet, steady and deeply satisfying. Mr. Jacobs packed up the papers and left, leaving just the two of us in the house. Richard slumped onto the couch, staring at nothing. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered. "I think you did," I said softly. "You just didn't think I'd be strong enough to fight back." As I turned to leave, he called after me, "Naomi, wait." I stopped at the doorway. "Are you really going to take the house?" I turned to face him. "Grandma left it to me, Uncle. But don't worry, I'm not cruel. You can stay here until you figure things out." His eyes widened in surprise. "You'd really let me stay?" "Yes," I said quietly. "But not for free. You'll pay rent and every dollar goes to a foundation I'm creating in Grandma's name. For elderly care. Something you never cared about." He swallowed hard, realizing the irony. You're just like her." I nodded. "Exactly. And she would have wanted me to give you a chance to learn from your mistakes. But make no mistake, this house isn't yours anymore. It's hers. It always will be." As I walked out into the crisp morning air, I felt the sun warm my face. For the first time in months, it didn't hurt to breathe. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery and placed a small bouquet of daisies on Grandma's grave. "It's done, Grandma," I whispered. "He won't hurt anyone again." A soft breeze rustled the trees. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe it was her way of saying "I told you so." Weeks later, word spread quickly through the family. No one defended Richard anymore. My cousins called to apologize, saying they should have believed me from the start. I didn't hold it against them. Sometimes people need proof before they see the truth. The best part? The foundation I built in Grandma's name started helping elderly people who'd been exploited by their families. It felt right, like turning pain into purpose. And as for Uncle Richard, he lived quietly in the same house, working odd jobs to pay his rent. Every month, he handed me a check, a silent reminder that karma has a long memory. Sometimes, revenge doesn't need to be cruel or loud. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is watching someone live in the shadow of their own mistakes, while you build something beautiful from the pieces they tried to break.